some of Lawson's transmutations over a period of more than a decade. There is an early memory of seeing him very much in love, a vivid and joyful image of he and Leonie. Between that time and now, he established Christ College of Trans-Himalayan Wisdom in New Zealand. He is its director. Most of you know he is a practicing astrologer, a very fine one, I can attest, based on another memory of having him read my chart. He is a grandfather and has moved into the elder stage of life. Thus, I suspect he knows a little something about the practice of standing. He will tell us about that now. Lawson Bracewell.
Thank you. As always, I stand before you feeling like all the year has drawn me to this one point. And I want to just for a few seconds do nothing more than make contact with you. Wow. Within myself, I have not a clue as to what I'm going to say to you. I know that I'm here, and I have, with a very dear Leo friend, prepared some slides that are going to be running. Perhaps what I will say will directly relate to a slide that's there. I want to begin by referencing what I know is the first slide. And the first slide is a temple created at Christ College of Trans-Himalayan Wisdom in Akaroa, New Zealand. And I was a part of a trio of Virgo Venus people, each one of us, the architect, the builder, and me, having our Venus in Virgo. And our attempt was to create something very simple, something very humble, and something very perfect. I'd like to begin by saying that I live there, and I also believe that we live there. We live in a temple. We live within a temple filled with fire. Our lives are fiery lives, which remove sequentially, in mysterious ways, everything that separates us from each other. The talk that I'm giving is basically about us, although I will reference me because I'm us. Everything that I am is us. Everything that you are is me. I think an earlier speaker said, it was William, said, well, we as disciples, we live this up and down, in and out existence. And it's just learning to be in that space where the we supports me, the me supports we, is what I think we're doing as we live within our fiery temple. As I was thinking, I went into the temple and I said, what is my talk this year? And so the talk title came through, and then I began what every other speaker has talked about, which is this yearly internal journey that you go on as you touch down into these themes and topics, and little experiences wash through you and ideas play through you. And the first thing that came to me was that I was going to change this mantra, which is so essential in my life as a disciple, this mantra of the disciple. and I was going to change the word from I to we. And so it was a momentary arresting. Fire went through me, you know, like, oh, can I do this? And then I did it. And so you're going to see this playing through there. All of the, most of you are very familiar with the mantra, but it's playing out in terms of we instead of I. But it, of course, includes the I. I'm a grandfather. I'm a child. And the more I am a grandfather, the more I'm reminded that I am a child. And so running through the conversation is one of my favorite stories, which is Sleeping Beauty, which was referenced in the previous talk. Everything that I'm going to say has been referenced in all the previous talks and all the previous speakers. Sleeping Beauty is really where we're at, the big we, you know, humanity sleeping. But so beautiful, you know. We, when you look out, as I have the privilege of doing right in this moment, looking out over all of these faces and imagining all the people who are out there in the ethers on this new streaming, webinaring reality, the multiplicity of light forms that are coming through, but sleeping. So, the first line in this mantra, we are a point of light within a greater light. Well, this is really, you know, we have a little mini demonstration of this because each speaker gets up and from their own particular consciousness shapes ideas. And as we're listening, pop, 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 pop. And it's all going on inside of me, we. Each one of these tiny little points in this sea of 6 billion manifesting souls is a tiny point of light. When I go into the meditation temple, my routine, my almost constant routine, is to make an alignment in which I enter into lighted spheres. So it's like one enters into, penetrates, dissolves, is in this greater light. And it's a metaphor, it's a symbol for this process that we're in. One of the things that I do in my daily life is that I teach. Much of the time, I feel like a tiny little speck of intelligence. What do I know? And then I enter into the we. Wow. Do you realize what's going on in the world in the we right now? We are growing as a light force with tremendous speed and potency. The mass is seeing itself through the light that we collectively, in each of our little lights, are putting there. And that lets me just release the limitation of my own particular consciousness as I identify with the we. The second line, we are a strand of loving energy within the stream of love divine. Wow, well, we're all connected. We're all connected. We all step into this stream. When we step into the stream, there isn't any sense of separation. Now, I inherently am a shy and awkward person. You know, if I had my druthers, I would press myself against the wall and watch. Because I'm endlessly fascinated with human beings. I like to watch them. But I find this a very comforting thing for we, as disciples, to focus on. All you have to do is step into the stream. Now, I always do feel like a clumsy little fish as soon as I do it. I want to say something stupid or something to, to represent my unconscious fears that I'm bringing into it. But then I start swimming. It's automatic. And we do that. And that's what we demonstrate as we go through our lives, whether it's at the checkout counter or walking into the United Nations, because we are people like Kofi Annan, who just has the boldness to walk into Syria without a clue, without a clue, except that he trusts that you can step in to this stream of love, and if you're patient enough and are willing just to stand in it, it's inevitable. You're going to get there. Second, or the third, is we are a point of fiery energy within the fiery will of God. That takes me back to the original slide of standing in the temple and having everything burnt up. And that's a trusting of death. I think that's really where we are at. We are standing within our own self-immolating beings. We've chosen to do it. We've chosen as a we to sacrifice ourselves. It's the only reason that we've incarnated at this particular point in time. To sacrifice ourselves, because there's a wonderful, wonderful process going on. A never-before happening process that all the speakers are referencing. We're destroying ourselves so that we can make it easy for people to destroy themselves, to step into the fire, to know that it's safe to die. It's a natural as it can be, because it is us. We are the fire. And thus we stand. This is the simplest and nicest part of the whole thing. It just requires that one has a sense of being present. Now, the breath helps a lot. I really recommend that we all breathe a lot more than we do. It sustains this one, just standing. There's nothing going on, really, despite all of the apparent urgings for action and doing. It just requires standing. We have, in fact, our limitations. We are instruments, whether individually or in the collective we. But if we stand, we will inevitably add to the light, swim in the love, and burn up if we just stand. The next one. We are a way by which men may achieve. Do we have to know the way? Well, I don't think so. I think it has a lot to do with trust. I am a very physical person in my mundane life. And one of my tasks at the moment is to find a way into a forest where I have previously cut down a lot of trees that were excess to the forest. They were being thinned. Right? Now, I don't actually have any way of knowing how to do that. I had to convince other people to go along on an experience for which I had absolutely no evidence that we were going to be successful, because I didn't actually know how to create a road into that. It required bridges and various other things, which I actually have never done in my life. So I had to assume that the way was in me. We can assume that the way is in us. As I found myself in that process of making the road through there, it was a continuous discovery process. It was like Braille. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I didn't know how I was going to deal with the next thing that was coming up. But there always was a next step. One of the nice things I think about being the way is that you're allowed to laugh at yourself the whole time that you are the way. I love the Dalai Lama's sense of humor. And I think the greatest laugh that I had at myself in the doing of this is that we'd made a bridge. And I realized that one of the concrete pillars that this bridge depended on was that much too short. Yeah, I mean, we were right in the midst of the process, and it was that much too short. So, first thing I did, of course, is just grab my handy chainsaw, sawed up a bunch of big timber, and made a platform on top of my concrete pylon. And then I looked at it and I went, well, that's profoundly stupid. So then I went racing back, cut up some bit of iron, reinforcing stuff, and more bags of cement, and more gravel, and more framing timbers, and made a proper one. But it was such a joke. I mean, what fool would do any of that? How many mistakes went into that? Tremendously comical. But in fact, it all took place in a couple of hours. In fact. So the way that we are all in, it just challenges us to trust and to be in it. We are the way. Then the next one is, are we anywhere? Well, we're on a beautiful face. Let's see.
Source of strength.
We are a source of strength. We are a source of strength, enabling them to stand, yes. And again, I think that the way that we demonstrate this is by being as transparent as possible. The transparency of our own inadequacies, our own suffering, our own experience. As we demonstrate that regardless of what is going on in our own personal lives, we continue to do that which we are guided to do. I'm in the midst of an earthquake zone in New Zealand, but it's just symbolic. All of us, all of the we are in earthquake experiences, where things are being shattered, things are being destroyed, the ordinary pattern of one's life isn't as it was. And so, I mean, in the last year, one son had his house destroyed and had to move his family somewhere else. Another son had his house destroyed and had to move his family somewhere else. Another son had twins appear in the world, and the twins are profoundly disabled. So beautiful little twin boys, incredible souls coming through very damaged forms. I must say, I just thought all that was just incredibly wonderful. A rich experience. Was all of me played in that? Of course. These are my sons, these are my daughter-in-laws, these are my grandchildren, and they're all going through this process. But they made it happen for me. They allowed me to stand. They forced me to come to my center in ways that I have never been at my center before. We're doing that. Now, that's what I see in the world. I see it in every one of you in this audience, but of course this is only a small part of the we that we are. all over the world, we are providing strength to people just by going through a process and remaining true to our highest ideals or our principles or our sense of purpose in our lives. Then the next one is, oh, we're really there. Oh, great. We are a beam of light shining upon their path. And this is another thing that I think that we don't often realize, but it is just by presencing. You know, just by being energetically present, sharing ourselves and trusting that our bodies are extending out. And it's amazing, you know, what the internet is doing. I've had this wonderful experience this last year where I jumped into something I thought I wouldn't like and couldn't do, and you know, it was to teach, you know, on the webinar, and you know, and it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. Oh, sure, I know, I recommend everyone do it. Why not? You know, it's like, I really do. You know, like, you know, most people that I talk to and I tell them about this, they think, oh, wow, that's amazing that you did that. But, I mean, we are doing that. We are. I mean, if you look at what's happening out there in that world, oodles and oodles of us, we are now in that medium teaching globally and providing a tremendous amount of light in spontaneous, just realizations and triggering those realizations in others. And, you know, I really encourage each one of you just to do it. Just to send out, hi, I'm doing this. I'm having a webinar on this. What should we talk about? Because you immediately set in motion a process of light being drawn out of you, and then you draw it out of other people. And thus we stand. I think that one of the images that I have when I think about standing is there's a four-fold field that I orient myself to. And the temple, of course, is oriented to the four directions. And then I look upwards, and I place myself at the apex of this four-fold field. And that's where I stand. The apex in the temple is a triple terminated quartz crystal. And at that point, I'm holding all of those energies which I am, which we are, and then work, then stand calmly at the center, because I know what I'm linked to. I know what I'm standing in. I'm standing in this stream of fire from the soul, this stream of fire from the monad. That's where I'm standing. And it allows then us, we, to stand in our lives when we create these visual demonstrations of where we stand. And standing, thus revolve. Well, you know, we're all building lighthouses. We're all building lighthouses inside of ourselves. And if we just keep ourselves in this continuous process of turning in all directions, then we illuminate the field, and we are illuminating the field that we live in. And tread this way, the ways of men. You know, we all are living ordinary lives. And the more that we just allow ourselves to live those ordinary lives, the more we allow ourselves to sink into it, the more that we have this sense of compassion and empathy, and can easily identify with those that we might revere as being more than us, because we're we. I was holding my grandson, and his particular disability is that part of his brain is just not functional. He's brain damaged, and he's 3 months old, and we're just getting to know each other. This is the first real visit where we're getting to know each other. And, it's just incredibly wonderful, and I'm just thrilling to pieces. And he's trying to figure out his grandfather, who's thrilling to pieces. And, and I start to massage his feet. Because, his little feet have the capacity, if they're continuously massaged, for some of these little bits to come into functioning, and parts of the brain that are still there may take on all sorts of functions, and who knows. And, then I was connected. I suddenly became connected to all of these wonderful parts of the collective we. Just, in a little tiny little baby foot. I was massaging it. And wow, I felt tremendously privileged. I wasn't just this dizzy little grandfather who was getting so ecstatic about this one little person, but I was massaging the feet of humanity. I was massaging the feet of the disciples. I was engaged in something that was reorienting all sorts of neural connections everywhere. And know the ways of God. We tread these mundane ways, but as above, so below. We're understanding the ways of God. We're allowing ourselves to be fully in the world. And those two complement each other. We bring the two together. And that's our destiny. To be like those 3 children, to be like this old couple making the transition together, celebrating the whole of life, because we're in a tremendous celebration. This taking of the first initiation is the biggest birthday party that we've ever had. It's full of surprises. Anything can happen, but it's the most joyous moment that we have ever been in and probably ever will be. The conclusion of the story, because I should wait until the final slide. So, and it looks like I reversed something as I was doing it. It doesn't make any difference. But we're at a place, we are at a place, where in one way we are waking up from the slumber of Sleeping Beauty. We know that humanity is taking the first initiation. But we are also waking up to our we-ness. We're waking up to this sense of being collectively one soul. And it's exhilarating for us to realize. It's self-empowering for us to realize this. The crisis that we're in is extremely humbling. And it's easy to fall back into a sense of meanness and the inadequacy of the little self. But the sense of we-ness, which we are awakening to, allows us to step into and know that I am the magnificence of that. I don't have to listen to one of the wonderful speakers with all of this information and think, I'm a dumbo. I hardly get anything that they're saying. I can say instead, I am that. This is me. This is part of the we that I am. We can do that, and that's our awakening. To break down the barriers that we have to each other as disciples, as part of this great collective we that we're in. We can see it as just facets of a jewel that we're just beginning to see. And thus we stand. And standing in this place, we then participate in the awakening of Sleeping Beauty, where humanity realizes that there is this wonderful, loving presence ever substanding all the struggle. There's a meaning to all the pain and suffering. There's a tremendous amount of love present in the moment. And so, just as the prince does